The wind clawed at the cliffs that night, sharp, relentless, cold. The kind of wind that strips the bark from trees and bites through the thickest wool coat. It howled over the Newfoundland coast, whipped through the black sky, and tore across the Atlantic in icy bursts. Out at sea, the SS Florizel cut through the darkness. Steam hissed from her stacks, her bow rising and falling in rhythm with the waves. She was a proud vessel, forged in the shipyards of Scotland and built to handle harsh northern waters. She'd carried sealers and soldiers, passengers and dignitaries. She was trusted. But not even steel has a soul. Not even experience guarantees survival. And by dawn, the pride of Newfoundland would lie broken on a reef, her decks torn apart, her passengers dead or dying as waves pounded the twisted wreck. The storm had come quickly. The decisions that led to disaster had come even faster. This is the story of the SS Florizel, the ship that was built for war but undone by weather, negligence, and fate. It was February 23rd, 1918. World War I was still raging overseas, and the North Atlantic was a dangerous place, if not from German U-boats, then from nature herself. The SS Florizel was scheduled to depart St. John's, Newfoundland, bound for Halifax, with plans to continue to New York. It was a well-traveled route, and Florizel was considered safe, even in winter. She was 285 feet long and 2,400 tons, designed as an icebreaker with a reinforced hull. She had been Newfoundland's first ocean liner, launched in 1909 as part of the Bowering Brothers Red Cross Line. She'd made history in wartime, too, converted into a troop transport during the early years of the war. In 1915, she carried members of the Newfoundland Regiment to Gallipoli. Now, she had returned to civilian service. That Saturday evening, 78 passengers and 60 crew boarded her in the port of St. John's. Among them were families, businessmen, soldiers, nurses, and children. Some were heading to Halifax to meet with relatives. Others planned to connect to New York-bound ships. The war loomed heavy in many minds, but few imagined danger on this side of the ocean. Captain William Martin was at the helm that night. He was seasoned, a veteran of many voyages. He had captained the Florizel before and knew the Newfoundland coastline well. But that night, the weather was already deteriorating. Snow had begun falling before departure. Wind whipped through the harbor. Ice crusted the rails. Still, Captain Martin believed they could beat the storm or sail through it. At 8:30 p.m., the Florizel pulled away from the dock. She moved slowly at first, navigating the narrow Narrows Channel that connected St. John's Harbor to the open sea. The city lights faded behind her. The dark Atlantic stretched ahead. Visibility was limited. Snow was heavy. The barometer was dropping fast. But Martin stayed the course. For the next few hours, the ship steamed southward. The captain believed they were well off the coast, safely east of the treacherous shoreline. He checked his instruments, consulted his charts, and relied on what mariners call dead reckoning, a calculation based on speed, time, and direction. It's a system that works, until it doesn't. Compasses can drift. Ice can slow a ship. Currents can pull a vessel off course. But Martin made no soundings. He didn't verify depth. He didn't slow. And the Florizel, unknown to all aboard, was gradually drifting west, toward land. Around 4 a.m., disaster struck. The ship hit rocks. The grinding was deafening, steel against stone, sudden and violent. The hull buckled. Passengers were thrown from their bunks. Some thought it was an iceberg. Others thought it was an explosion. The truth was simpler and more horrifying. The SS Florizel had crashed into the rocky headland at Hornhead Point, near Kappa Hayden. Worse, she had hit at full speed. The bow crumpled against the reef. Seawater poured in. The stern rose, teetered, and slammed down again. The ship was mortally wounded. Panic swept through the decks. In steerage, passengers were already knee-deep in freezing water. Some tried to climb, others screamed. Crew members rushed to calm them, but the stairwells were jammed, doors had warped shut, lifeboats were nearly useless. The waves were too rough, the snow too thick. Visibility was near zero. On the upper deck, Captain Martin tried to assess damage. The Marconi wireless operator began sending SOS messages. Nearby stations heard garbled transmissions, but couldn't pin down the ship's location. And as the storm worsened, the Florizel began to break apart. At daybreak, locals on the cliffs spotted something out at sea. A dark shape, listing. It was the Florizel, her bow driven up on the rocks, her stern nearly submerged. Dozens of people were visible on deck, huddled against the cold, waving frantically. Villagers from Cappahayden rushed to help. Some tried to launch boats, but the sea was too wild. Waves flipped their small dories. Rescuers had to turn back. All they could do was watch. The ship held together for most of the day, but by afternoon, the stern was breaking off. Those who had fled there hoping it was safer were now being swept into the ocean. Bodies began to wash ashore. Among those lost were children. 2-year-old Betty Munn was aboard with her nursemaid. Her father, John Munn, was a wealthy businessman and one of the owners of the Bowring Brothers line. Betty was traveling to New York to meet him. Neither she nor her nurse survived. Their bodies were found days later, still together. That image of a small child cradled in the arms of her caretaker shocked Newfoundland. It became the tragedy's symbol. Years later, a memorial statue was erected in her honor. It still stands today in St. John's, an angel with outstretched wings facing the sea. Rescue finally arrived the next morning, nearly 36 hours after the shipwreck. The government dispatch boat Bellaventure and a tug called Glencoe arrived on scene. By then, the survivors had been exposed to the elements for a day and a half, without shelter, food, or heat. Only 44 people were still alive. One was found clinging to a railing with frozen hands. Another had wrapped himself in a torn tarp. Some had frostbite so severe they later lost limbs. Many of the bodies recovered were barely recognizable, faces blackened by cold, clothes shredded. Some had broken bones. Others had drowned after hours in the water. All told, 94 people had died. An inquiry followed. The results were damning. Captain Martin had failed to confirm his position. He had not taken soundings. He had sailed too close to shore and too fast in a blizzard. He was found guilty of gross negligence. His license was revoked permanently. Some defended him, saying he'd acted heroically after the crash, trying to save lives, giving his own lifebelt away. But the court saw it differently. The tragedy, they said, was preventable. The wreck of the Florizel was later salvaged. Some parts were removed, including her boilers and machinery. But most of the ship remained on the reef, twisted, rusted, and broken. Today, her bones still lie beneath the waves near Cappahayden, and the name Florizel is spoken in hushed tones in Newfoundland. Not as a legend, but as a warning about the weight of a captain's choices, about the danger of hubris, about the fragility of life on the sea. The passengers of the SS Florizel trusted the ship, trusted the crew, trusted the sea. But the sea does not care who you are, or where you're going, or what you believe you know. It just takes. And on that night in 1918, it took nearly all of them. Thank you for listening to the Sunken Ledger. Subscribe for more true stories from the depths.